Welcome to A Really Good Sex Chat, a podcast aiming to open up conversations about disability and sexuality. I'm your host, Candice Care-Unger, psychosexual therapist and specialist social worker at Care Rehab. Join us as we have frank conversations about sexuality, disability, fertility, pleasure, dating, and everything in between. This podcast is brought to you by Care Rehab and recorded on Darug land. In this episode of A Really Good Sex Chat, we're talking with Jess Pellow. We're going to explore what happens when you have an injury as a young kid and acquire a disability coming through the rehabilitation paediatric services, and some of the ways that her injury changed opportunities for accessible sexuality education, and how her injury has helped shape her creative view on sexuality and some of her accessible dating tips, as well as so much more. So let's just get into the chat. Hey Jess, thank you so much for joining us on A Really Good Sex Chat. It's so good to see you, to have you with us. And for those who don't know you, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Hey everyone who is listening, thanks for tuning into A Really Good Sex podcast. My name is Jess. I am a C6 to T3 super incomplete quadriplegic. There are more and more of us out there now, which is really nice to see that technology is keeping up with the incomplete quads, giving us a bit more independence and mobility. I've had my injury since the year 2000. I was 7 years old when I was in a motor vehicle accident with my sister and my mother. My sister is a C6, C7 incomplete quad technically, but yeah, like complete incomplete quad. She's paralyzed from her chest down. We both grew up regionally. We grew up on a farm up until I was 13. Grew up with livestock, sheep, cattle, helping dad around the farm, sort of working out how to do that. We had sort of semi-accessible farm equipment that I could kind of use that we just made work to our advantage. And if any time dad needed a hand, I was able to do that. Lots of dogs, a few feral cats that had come back every year to have kittens and then take off again. And a cheeky barn owl here and there that would come and hang out every now and then, which was cool.
That sounds like a really fun childhood. Like lots
You know
of...
what? I love being on the farm, and I love saying to people I was a farm kid because it's something I've carried with me, and it's something that being part of a very small community from the get-go has always kind of stayed with me to really remind me that no matter what part of a community I'm a part of, you do whatever you can to help out that community. And it's the same in disability community, in the wheelie community in particular. It's, it's like, hey, I've got this resource. Is it something that you could use potentially to help out with? And yeah, basically from there, I started going to school in a bigger town in Wagga Wagga, which is a small city now. It's classified as. And I went from having, I think I had 7 kids in my year to 100 kids in my year. And it was about, I want to say there was like at least 500-600 kids at that school. And that was how many lived in my very small village where I grew up previously to that. So it was a big culture shock. But we moved into town because it was just better for us disability-wise. And I'd started playing sport, played wheelchair basketball, started when I was 12, wanted to go further with that. So we moved into Wagga to give both my sister and I more opportunities. So my sister's 3 years younger. She sort of took an interest in a bit of tennis, a little bit of swimming, a little bit of everything, but it was more just about just really finding herself. And I found myself pretty quickly in the basketball community. I still continue to play basketball to this day. So yeah, it was me growing up with a menagerie of differences in how I grew up as a kid. So I wasn't just that kid with a disability. I wasn't born with my disability. I acquired my disability from a young age. But the one thing it was that everything just kind of felt normal. And I think that was a real blessing for me because I was so young. I didn't have anything to compare it to, and I still could walk bits and pieces. So up until I was 8 years old, I played netter as well, like little kids netball.
Yeah, nice.
And because I could stand up, I would fall over a lot, and then someone would run out on court, pick me back up, and then I'd stand up again. It was great. It was a great time. But yeah, I could still play that with my friends. I was always really into sport. I was always out on the playground at school, particularly in the small school that I grew up on up until I was 13. Was always out with my 2, walking sticks, playing soccer with the boys, and, sort of trying to kick goals. And I played cricket and handball, and it was just everything. But yeah, basketball was that one thing that really gave me a lot of freedom. Just the amount of different things that I found growing up that felt normal was at the time just kind of just that big one, at least preteen
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. I mean, like what you're talking about here in terms of being injured as a young kid, I just, we did the math. You were 7 at the time of your injury. So,
Yeah.
really starting to form your interests and your people. And I hear you when you say that you had your injury at a time where you were then able to form your identity with a disability as well.
Yeah.
And growing up in a rural town like that, there were a lot of other kids. I mean, yes, your sister, obviously, so that normalized everything at home. But outside of the two of you, were you around?
The only person that I'd seen in wheelchairs were sort of aged and elderly people around the area. There was one other person in a wheelchair in Temora who was sort of half an hour away from where I grew up. I didn't really know him. I think I'd seen him around town maybe once. He's a very, very active member of the community down there, but it's just I'd never seen him, or if I had, I really hadn't taken much notice. It was what it was, even though it felt definitely polarizing at times where I couldn't do things or I couldn't move as quick as the other kids or get up on the play equipment as good as the other kids could. There were still things that I could do that made it still feel like I was still that same kid. I think identity wise, you're right. When you start forming an identity, I didn't form an identity around my disability and I didn't have to reshape my identity around my disability. When we talk about identity as people with disabilities, it's such a big thing to go from being seen as a disabled person to a person with disability. That's a big process that no matter what age you get injured from, that's really where you formulate everything. I truly do believe that it's about mindset. Having a disability is a small part of me, just like every other facet of who I am is a small part of me. It all makes up who I am. It's they're fractions of who I am as a person.
But important parts that make up the whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so tell me, 7-year-old you growing up in country towns, where did you learn about sex?
Honestly, it wasn't at school. It was probably the internet more than anything else.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely
Bit of
the
Googling?
internet. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And learning from a very early age that you're meant to wipe at the history so the parents don't find out.
Okay, cool. All right.
Wiping the browser history is a smart move. But yeah, that was where I did most of my Googling growing up. And that was just about sex in general because, again, I didn't identify with the disability at that point in time. And it wasn't until I'm probably going to say about 17 or 18 that I really started identifying with stuff that it's like, well, I probably can't do that purely based on my level of ability. And it's not been until I've been much later in life that I've really sort of focused on can't really do that sort of thing. So what's a way around that I can do it? So it's probably not until I've been in my mid to late 20s, really, I would say that I've really sort of seen, well, I can't do that. Kind of should be able to do that, but I can't do that. So I kind of have to work out different ways of doing things. And that's been formulated through sexuality, just sort of imagination. I went to a Catholic high school. So as much as they had to teach sex, they didn't really focus on it too much. I didn't go to a creationism Catholic high school. My first year of year 7, they said, look, as much as we are a Catholic school, we do teach about evolution and we have to be realistic about evolution. So I'm always very thankful for that. Shout out to Mater Dei Catholic College in Wagga Wagga. Good job, guys. One of these days I'll make it to your wiki page as being one of your athletes.
You're injured at 7. I'm sure the rehab doctors aren't turning around saying, hey, what do you want to know about sex? Anytime before the age of 16. That's really very uncommon. So you got your basic sort of PE sex education coverage at high school. My understanding of sex ed, even now, let alone back in the early 2000s. Yeah, it's very able-bodied and it's very heterosexual and it's very much focused on biology, like having babies, managing menstruation, and it's a bit STI avoidant.
No one focused on pleasure. No one focused on the fact that sex is such an amazing thing because they all wanted teenagers to stay away from it.
Yeah.
Which, you know what, I kind of get to a certain extent. But at the same time, you don't teach boys how to pleasure girls, and girls don't ever actually come to realize that they can enjoy sex for pleasure in general. That's a big point, and if it's always so focused on the sort of male-centric part, particularly in the hetero-speaking sense, if it's so focused on male pleasure and male performance, then women don't ever actually get taught that it's okay to enjoy sex or that their enjoyment should be paramount to a positive sexual experience as well. And it's not just over when a guy ejaculates or finishes.
Yeah, I mean, that conversation comes up all the time, particularly if you can't ejaculate. How do you know when it's finished? And then if you're having sex with someone who doesn't have a penis, it's like, well, when do you know when to stop? All of that is
Like when when your hands physically can't do anything else. That's how
when
you know when
exhaustion takes over.
like when you're about to pass out because it's been about 6 hours. That's when you go, okay, I need a timeout and I need a water break. I need to rehydrate.
All right. So where do you learn about adaptive sex coming through? Because obviously in the adult units, the
Yeah.
adults all come together and they have peer education and they have like a learning together kind of program where they're explicitly taught and, you know, opportunities to learn about sex following spinal cord injury happen. But what happens for kids when they're injured?
I think for me, I was solely not really focused on anything like that. I didn't have a boyfriend until I had a long distance boyfriend when I was 15. He was also a basketballer too. So we'd catch up whenever I'd go play basketball, which may be 6, 7, 8 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
We'd catch up over a weekend. It was always like supervised. We never did sleepovers or anything like that.
Mm.
I was more interested in the intimacy side of it rather than the actual sex side of it. For me, it was more interested what I've learned as I've grown older. It's more about, for me, feeling like I can trust the person that I'm with and that was such a big focus for me as well while I was dating the boyfriend at the time. We never really sort of spoke about it. It's like we barely made out. Like it was more just about the fact that we were like best friends who dated pretty much at that point. So, and that's what it was. And it's still something I carry through to this day. Whenever I date new people, I feel like I'm dating my best friend because it's so focused on the emotional side. But for me, I didn't really start becoming sexually active until I moved out of home. The first time I slept with someone, I think I was 19. That was a really beautiful experience. That was my first girlfriend. We dated for 3.5 years. I was glad to have that experience there because after I'd come out, I came out at 18 around Christmas time, and then I started exploring sort of dating women and that kind of thing, and it's an experience just like it is dating men, I'm sure. Again, nothing to compare to. And my first sexual experience was at 18, and then that was exactly how we did, just as what we did for quite a while. And then it wasn't until we were maybe 18 months, 2 years into the relationship that my partner approached me and it's like, oh, I'd like to start looking at toys. And I was like, yeah, sure, happy to do that. And then we sort of started exploring, and that was my first introduction to sort of looking at sex toys and intimacy aids. There were certain things that, when I was in my early 20s, I was like, oh, I don't like that kind of thing. That now that I sit there, I'm like, maybe interesting. As I'm getting older, mobility changes as well. There are certain toys that I do find work a lot better for me if I'm choosing to use toys at that point in time with any partner that I have. So for me, it was always more about intimacy, and I really wasn't interested in sex until probably after I moved out of home and I felt like they actually had the freedom to do what I wanted to do. So I moved from Wagga to Sydney when I was 18 and really got to explore and formulate who I was as a person and really form like that base as my identity then, which I think is always evolving.
Just like what you're talking about here is completely age appropriate, got nothing to do with disability and just more like coming of age type stuff, right? Like you move out of home, you have more freedoms, you have more opportunities and a certain amount of confidence in yourself.
You're not hiding under the blanket thinking it's this naughty thing to do. You're just kind of sitting there just watching going, okay, that's another option. It's like, okay, I could probably make that work for me. And it's like, if I want to feel like this, or if I know this gives me pleasure. I did a lot of exploration about what felt good to me too. That was always a big thing for me whenever a new sexual partner come into my life. It's like, okay, there are certain things I can feel. There are certain things I can't feel. This is what feels good to me. And it's about that emotional connection for me.
And the communication around it. Once the mind's turned on, then the body can come along for the ride.
1,000%. My mind has to be involved. Like it has to be like a full body experience for me. It really does have to be a full body experience for me to be able to get the most out of pleasure. For me personally, I also like giving as much as I like receiving, because I think that's just my personality. It's like I like to make people feel good, not just in the bedroom, but out of the bedroom as well. That's just who I am. And I really do know that for me, it's such a positive experience in all aspects of life. So I guess in the bedroom is exactly as I do out of the bedroom, and that's by trying to make people feel good and feel happy and a positive experiences all around.
Yeah, Jess, what I'm hearing though is this story of belonging, right? Like as a young kid, belonging to
PTSD from
community. You kind of grew up in a town where you felt like people knew you, and then you were in a family where you were seen and you were provided opportunities to be you, and then you come to Sydney and you get a chance to explore relationships, and you're looking for opportunities for those relationships to be genuine and to actually have a connection. And so when I say belonging, I mean, feeling like you are completely accepted. And I think one of the things that I've kind of observed over the years working with folks who have transitioned from paediatric services into adult services is some of them can have huge amounts of anxiety around sex because there hasn't been a lot of accessible education. Maybe they participated in PE related, sex ed, but it's so able-bodied. Yeah. And then they haven't had like tailored sex ed that includes spinal cord injury considerations, bladder, bowel kind of considerations, positioning advice, managing sensation, managing autonomic dysreflexia. Like there's a variety of things that can just give people a bit of anxiety. It's like the unspoken. And in the unspoken, people think, oh, well, they're not going to assume that I'm sexual. So then opportunities come.
I think the beautiful thing with those as well as you think about those, I guess, I don't want to call them a barrier because they're not a barrier, but they're like a perceived hindrance to those sorts of things. It's like, for me, looking at those sorts of things, it's like if I'm having issues with my bladder, it's like, oh, cool, shower sex. Like it's, it's like you get to then sort of really just explore different ways that it's actually going to work within your favor. And I guess for me, definitely I was not mentally or emotionally prepared to have those conversations with the rehab therapist I had at 15, 16, 17, 18. It was something I wanted to find for myself because, again, we still talk about sex as being something that's very taboo. It's not a good thing. It's different now because I think a lot of people are so open, and obviously podcasts like this are doing massive things to change not just sex for people with spinal injuries or people with disabilities. It's just changing the way that we view sex in general. I think that when I was particularly growing up in those 2000, like those mid to late 2000s, it was for me, it was just like, I don't want to talk to anyone else about it. I just want to be able to find where I want to find the information from it at whatever point that I was ready for. I was not ready to hear from someone else about pleasure and what was going on with my body because I wanted to be able to find that for me. And I think that that's a big one that a lot of people may not realize is that some kids, and I add myself in this completely, is that I probably wasn't emotionally equipped to deal with sex or sexuality or anything to do with that at 16, 15, 14, whenever anyone wanted to talk about it. I was able to experience it and explore it in the time that I was ready and mentally prepared to do it.
And do you think there's a difference there, like having had a disability, that there was just other things that you were focused on?
I think yes and no. I think for me, because I was so focused on sport, being an athlete, and I was focused on what I wanted to achieve out of that it was second to none, really. I was so focused on my weekly routine of like, okay, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, I'm on court. Tuesdays, Thursdays, I do a gym session. Tuesdays after school, I have, tutoring. Thursdays after school, I have physio. And then weekends, I play basketball. It was very much about getting the most out of my week as possible. And because that was the focus for me, I think if I didn't have that focus, and I guess I was hanging out with friends at school more conversations would have probably come up about that. And it may have piqued my interest when I was younger, but I was not focused on that because I was focused on being an athlete in my teens because that's what I wanted to be at that point in time.
Yeah, this is like a message to all the parents. You want to keep your kids distracted and off the internet searching porn, get them into sport.
No, but like there's an element of that that's so true though. It's like even still, like I won't say it didn't keep me off porn because there was obviously still days where I was like, you know what, I want to see something because it's different and it's like I'm curious. It wasn't even the fact that I was horny. It was just something that I was like there was a little bit of a fascination there.
Yeah. And like, if no one's talking about it and you're like, well, where else are you going to find information?
They're not taking the taboo out of it. And it's like, but even if they had approached me to talk about it, I don't know whether me being me would have been just like reverted into myself a lot and just let someone speak and not really taken it in. Because again, it's more of I want to find this for myself. Yeah.
It sounds very normal, adolescent type sexual development. And that's why we know, like, PE classes are so awkward because everyone's sitting there going, oh God, why are we doing this? And like the sex chat at home is, for many people, it's like one of the core memories of ick, which on one hand is why we kind of often give the advice of regular conversations, small conversations often. So it's not like this, hey, let's sit down and have the chat.
Yeah,
That,
like we're not
bodies are
talking birds and
normalized.
bees right now. We're not talking birds and bees. It's like, yeah, but I was raised by a single parent. I was raised by my dad. My mum was killed when my sister and I were injured. He did have help with support workers and stuff in the home. But my advice to my dad would have been just like, yeah, maybe upskill yourself a little on personal development for girls. And he created a space where if I felt like I needed to come to him with something going on, I could. He was a single parent for a very, 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 very long time with 2 kids with spinal injuries.
And a set of very tragic circumstances.
Absolutely.
Bloody good job, Dad.
Yeah, well done. Well done, Philip. Great job.
Yeah, good job.
Nice job, old boy. But yeah, no, I think I also, like, growing up without, like, I did have a lot of strong female figures in my life. But I also think that growing up without a mum too also played a big part in it. I had mother figures and mother roles, and I had aunties, and I had those strong females in my life, but I didn't have that mother. So I think that also played a big part in a lot of my development as well. I think that things would have been once I started growing boobs, or when I got my period at 12, or, that would have been a big thing, and learning about personal hygiene from mum as well, because she would have been like, okay, well, this is what I do for this. And because you're my daughter, I know that this is going to happen. And this is probably what's going to go down. And just one of those conversations at one point probably would have been a lot better. But, we've managed, we've gotten to where we need to go. We've worked out bladder and bowel at some point. Well, I think most wheelies can sit there and say that, yes, I do still carry around a spare set of clothes in a backpack whenever I go anywhere, because it just, you never know what's going to happen. But
it's just being prepared.
Yeah. That's being prepared.
Okay, so what I hear here is, with hindsight, maybe some prep conversations around puberty and body autonomy, and
like you said, just small conversations of like, that's normal, totally normal, that's okay. These are the options that I have for you. We can do this, we can do that. I don't suggest that. Just an FYI to any girls or people who menstruate out there going forward, I never suggest anyone with a spinal injury getting any of the diva cups, because they're really hard to get in and they're even harder to get out.
No, I'm a massive fan of just period undies. I think they're so much more practical. And
I'm still a big fan of a tampon. Just because they're so easy for me. And I find that I have sort of sensitive skin around my pelvic area. I find that pads can often give me rashes and stuff and get very irritated, and can actually get some welting in certain areas. So I use them very, very, very sporadically. For all girls out there, is period undies and no diva cups. And if you're comfortable enough to use tampons, then you can very, very easily use tampons too. Just remember to set the timer on your watches.
Yeah, I was going to say the issue is just around forgetting maybe how long you've had that there, and the access.
Yes, that's it. If I can plan it for overnight, so I can normally get away with doing an overnight sleep with tampons. Like, I can do the 8 hours maximum. Depends how heavy it is too. There are some months where my period's so heavy that I can't even wear tampons, and I have to go by Depends or something because it's just so heavy and I just need it. It's one of those things, you sit there and you talk to your gynecologist or your GP who has done a rotation in gynecology, and she goes, that's just normal. That's just normal. And you sit there and you're like, I have a spinal injury though. Is that normal?
Yeah.
Like, is that normal? Is there not something extra going in there? So with my spinal injury also came a lot of internal bleeding for me as well. So I tore one of the major arteries in my stomach when I was injured. I had a multitude of other injuries as well as a spinal injury. I had a stretched optical nerve. I had a brain stem injury as well, which healed. And I also had 9 broken ribs. With the injuries that I had in my stomach, particularly in my lower stomach as well, I had staples after massive emergency surgery straight after my injury. I don't know what works in there and what doesn't. I know I have a neurogenic bladder, which causes some issues. I know I have weakness in my bowel, which can sometimes cause issues. Certain foods I can't eat a lot of because then that causes bowel issues, just like any other person with or without a disability. Some people can eat spicy food, some people can't. I know if I eat too much fatty food, then my stomach goes crazy. It's just managing those sorts of things, especially when you're talking to GPs, particularly about women's health, and talking about what factors of my injury factor into this being not normal or this being too heavy. And so particularly when you talk about period flow. So for anyone that menstruates, period flow in particular is one of those ones that's like, wow. As a sidebar, I was quite overweight a few years ago. I hit about 165 kilos at one point. And I had 2 cycles of my period in 2 years. So I was so
Ooh.
heavy that my period just was not going. And it didn't really worry me because I was loving it. I didn't have to worry about it, didn't have to deal with it, wasn't even getting the cramps. I've lost about 70 kilos now. And at this stage, I get a regular period every month and it is heavy. And for me, it's just like, okay, my body's just getting back into the swing of it kind of thing. But it's been
Mm.
nearly 2 years of just these constantly quite heavy periods. And it also sits at that point where you kind of go, at what point do I actually start bringing it up to my GP again that it's
Mm.
actually, it feels excessively heavy?
Yeah, it's like impacting
Because,
on my quality of life.
yeah,
What I hear you talking about here, Jess, though, is that people can see things almost siloed, like women's health issues. This is what's normal at this age. Spinal cord injury. This is what happens in spinal cord injury.
there's
Okay,
the
well,
crossover.
yeah, or maybe I have endometriosis. Maybe it's got
Yeah,
nothing to do with spinal cord injury. Maybe it's got nothing to do with being 30. Maybe it's something else.
yeah.
But we kind of get like horse blinkers on, and we're just sort of looking down a lane and we miss
Yeah,
things.
pigeonhole. It's like, okay, but you got a spinal injury and that's why this is causing this. And I had severely painful period pains for a few years there where they thought that I had endo for quite a
Mm.
while. They didn't do any laparoscopic surgery. It was just the fact that they gave me strong painkillers and they were like, just take this once a month. If it's only 24 hours out of the 5 to 7 days that you bleed, then you should be okay. I'm 31 this year and my body's now changing again in terms of hormones because now I'm sort of getting random spotting throughout my month. And it's just like, oh God, is there anything else that wants to change on me right now kind of thing? It's hard enough being a woman, but then you throw spinal into that being like, okay, I've got to be careful because I know that at the start of my cycle, I can get quite constipated as well. So I've got to be careful to be managing that as well and making sure
A
that
lot
I'm
of
aware
people
of
talk
that.
about that.
Yeah. And it's like my one thing that I used to bring up, particularly in a lot of sexual health talks that I spoke to and spoke with a lot of, particularly at Royal Rehab at Royal North Shore in Sydney, was do women who get their periods who are prone to dysreflexia, does that trigger their dysreflexia? And what do you
Yeah.
do for 7 days? Because
Yeah.
it doesn't happen to me. My injury is like, it technically is that high up, but I don't have any severing of my spinal cord that I get that. So it's my disability is not to that point where it's like, I feel like I need to use the bathroom. I get goosebumps, but then I go and use the bathroom and it's fine.
Emily talked about this in her episode of having dysreflexia the whole way through her pregnancy and the whole way through periods. And I think that's exactly, some of the challenges for women with spinal cord injury as well, is sort of managing additional complications.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go back to being a young person, learning about sex and who they are, not really feeling comfortable to talk about sex with other people, particularly rehab clinicians, and being more interested in Googling. That kind of says to me, how do we deliver education to young people? And maybe it is about more accessible online stuff they can just read later.
I think it's online accessibility, really. For me, it would have been more about online accessibility and not making it look so juvenile as well.
Uh-huh.
I think it's actually talking to someone like they are, like that young adult, and being like, okay, this is where you're at. This is the question.
So maybe now we'll give them a podcast link and say, listen to this episode. Maybe it can just normalize the fact that you had your injury at 7 and now you're 17 and you're not 7 anymore.
Yeah, I kind of get why people want to do that now, especially when you get to start exploring your own body and finding things that do feel good for you and trusting yourself that it's not a bad thing what you're feeling. A lot of times it's so focused around guys because it's so visible for guys in particular when they become aroused, whether it be a reflex erection or something like that. It may just be a way that a sheep brushes against their leg or against their neck or something like that. Girls, it's exactly the same. Just because you can't physically produce an erection that is noticeable does not mean it doesn't happen. It could be someone blowing on your ear, blowing on your neck. It's different stimulations in different places to find where that pleasure is. You have to go searching for that because from my limited experience with men, and I mean very limited, most of the time, particularly young men, don't want to go searching for ways to make you feel good. They want to focus on their own pleasure. I now strictly sleep with women and people with vulvas because that is my choice. Women tend to be a lot more open and emotional in a good way when it comes to finding pleasure and figuring out pleasure and making sure that both parties feel good. This is not me waving the rainbow flag to be a lesbian. Trust me, women are bloody hard work at the same time. But keeping yourself open-minded to what experiences you are comfortable with and where you feel comfortable and making sure you're in a safe space to explore those things as well is probably the biggest things that I would say. I never put myself in a situation where I was unsafe, but that was because I grew up very, very regionally and very rurally, and moving into a city, I already had my wits about me that I knew what was safe and what wasn't safe. I
You
made
had a higher
sure,
level of caution.
yeah, cautiousness is 100% there. I know a lot of people who don't have that level of caution who could have gotten themselves into very, very dodgy situations, both in chairs and out of chairs. There's no discrimination when it comes to being those people.
Having some safety around you and just an awareness. We talk about this as sexual safety sort of literacy, you know, like what is it that you
Absolutely.
need to be aware of to keep yourself safe emotionally and physically? And
Still
so,
working on the emotional side, but definitely the physical
okay,
side. I'm not going to say
yeah,
I'm a pro when it comes to emotional safety, when it comes to sex and sexuality and intimacy, but I will say physically safe so that you can keep yourself emotionally safe and you're not putting yourself in a situation where you feel like you aren't allowed to say no.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's 100% the biggest one for you.
yeah. Okay, so for any young person who's listening today, you've had your injury and you're thinking, okay, am I ready? I mean, readiness is a big thing, right? So there's the am I ready, but there's also consider your safety. Let's circle back to readiness here. What do you think is important for knowing when you're ready?
Well, putting it down to honestly is probably self exploration. I think you really do need to work out what makes you feel good for you and whether that's finding toys that make things feel good. And I'm going to be very open and honest here. It could be
Mm.
anything from butt plugs, anal stimulation, because you know what? Anal stimulation, girls, actually makes things feel so much better when it's vaginal insertion then as well, if that's what you're into. I know for me personally, if I have that anal stimulation there, it actually enhances the sensation, the limited sensation that I have vaginally. So for me, it's exploring things and being open to exploring things that maybe a little bit like, oh, but it's so taboo and it's so this and it's so that. Fuck that. Go and explore. Go have some fun. Go
Mm.
enjoy. Go enjoy. Go safely. Read all the instructions first before you go and start trying things. Make sure you've got good lube, all that good stuff, especially if you are in that situation where you aren't self lubricating because of a disability. Definitely make sure that you've got that good water based lube because it's, it's normally pretty safe for everyone. And make
I
sure
think
you monitor.
within the neurogenic bowel community,
Yeah.
there's a lot more understanding of bowels because
Yes.
folks have to learn about this around continence and depending on how people do their bowel care, they actually learn their anatomy really well. And I just totally normalize that if you've worked out, you actually have way more sensation there than anywhere else. Go with the sensation, explore the sensation. And I think what you're kind of starting to talk about there in terms of like the safety considerations is the physical safety considerations.
Physical
Lube,
safety for yourself, 100%. Making
flare
sure,
bases, what goes
yes,
in must come out. So it must always be body safe. It must always have a flared base. It
yes,
must always be able to be retrieved. And so any kind of
yep,
curiosity around sensation there can be safely explored, but don't just use random
absolutely.
household items,
No,
like
no, 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 no. And I understand if you're a teenager, certain household items are what is accessible to you because you probably don't want to have that conversation with your parents. And I totally understand that having that conversation with your parents is mortifying. Totally okay, totally understandable. And your parents may not be open to having those conversations as well. And that's fine as well. Like that's maybe where they've drawn those boundaries. This is
email
where
Care
you
Rehab. We'll chat later.
There we go. Email Care Rehab. Reach out to your rehab specialist.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're over the age of 16, you can actually have that conversation with your rehab specialist one on one without having your parents there because that is the age where they should start beginning to transition you to learning how to be an adult with a disability.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that that's a big one as well. So realizing that you can trust your care specialist to not have those conversations with your parents because you've requested that this be a conversation between the two of you.
Yeah.
Probably the one thing that I would say is having body dysmorphia or that body dysphoria as a kid with a disability, as a person with a disability, is a big deal. For me in particular, I was always going to be a bit of a bigger kid. I was always on a little bit of the chunkier side. But when I say chunkier, I was 75 kilos at 16, 18, which is
Perfect.
perfectly respectable from my understanding. But for me, I think because my abs didn't work properly, so I couldn't tone up my abs. So I always had like that, what you call the paragut or the quad gut,
Yeah.
which is even more pronounced for me now. That was something that was quite hard for me. And it was something that I found that I wanted to hide more and more behind baggy clothes. And
Yeah.
there were very, very minimal things that I thought made me feel comfortable. I'm noticing that now as I'm getting older. I have much more of a pronounced paragut, quad gut now with all those sort of things moving there. Even things like Spanx and stomach controllers, they don't work for someone who sits down every day. They really don't. And it's incredibly frustrating when you see like bodysuits that look phenomenal, but if they don't have like a toilet flap, then there's no fucking point in you wearing them, kind of thing, because they're a nightmare to get on and off. I think the big one for me in particular is finding clothes that are comfortable for me. Now, I dress based on what I'm feeling in that any one point in that day. So I tend to dress more on the masculine side of things, and that's how I portray myself and that's how I feel comfortable dressing. I could only imagine how hard it would be for someone who, like for a young woman who wants to wear beautiful flowy dresses or wants to wear these skin tight dresses because they look phenomenal and amazing, but struggles with that body image of as soon as they look in the mirror, they can see your stomach or you can see your tummy a little bit. And knowing that bodysuits and like skims and stuff like that just doesn't work for you. I still haven't found a product for me that works in terms of making my stomach flatter and sitting where it needs to sit while I'm sitting down all day. I also don't think it's probably healthy for me to have something constricting my stomach for
No.
8 hours a day when I'm working a 9 to 5. I guess we all have what we need to have, and we all see our things, and we need to find what is comfortable, and finding different styles of clothes, finding different designers, finding what feels like you, multiple different sources. And if you need to shop it somewhere like City Chic just to get that extra size up so then you can tailor it to what's going to be comfortable for you, do that. If you need to go 2 sizes up because you need something that you can actually take to a tailor or a seamstress and say, hey, I need this taken in, but leave this exactly how it is because that's what my comfort is, do it. I think body dysphoria, particularly for teenage girls, is hard enough as it is without adding a level of disability onto it that actually makes it much more pronounced. So I think that that's a big one that I've not found the answers to yet, but I'm still searching, and I'm 31, so I've got a long time of searching yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's such an interesting thing for us to be talking about here in terms of, body image and how it is that we feel confident in the body that we have. And I know that's a lot of the work that we do. We have one body. It's maybe not the body that we imagined or wanted or even kind of had at one point, and then now it's changed. But just like, what is it about this wonderful body that we can love and that we can be thankful for in terms of the way that it helps you live in this world at this time? This is all really complicated, heavy stuff, and I think what you're talking about is not uncommon. The body image
Yeah.
piece is very much a part of the puzzle.
And I write poetry quite a bit, and
Do
I
you?
wrote this piece. Yeah, I do. And I wrote this piece of poetry that's about body image. It's not one that's going to give anyone any sort of hope or anything like that, but
Mhm.
it's more the fact that it's going to resonate with people, I think. It's a very short piece. It's untitled, it doesn't have a title. It starts off with loving the vessel you are in. Why do words force you to believe what your spirit cannot? Why do you say to the person in the mirror, focusing on 2 eyes instead of the whole image, because she will know what her heart will do if she gazes below her smile? Too big, too soft, too much? It's still not enough, or it's too much. Perfection doesn't exist, and yet we keep striving for impossibilities. I'm heavy with the weight of society, weak with familial perceptions, and clouded by the fear of the already damned. Why must I not perceive myself as enough? It's not to give anyone hope, obviously, but it's more for people to actually go, I understand that, I see that, and I feel that.
And how we work with that core belief of not enough. And that's where the work is, right? And that's how our team can kind of help people, creating spaces to unpack and talk about that, and then the impact that then has on sexual
Absolutely.
confidence.
Absolutely. Because there are days when you feel like enough. There are days when you feel
Yeah.
amazing. And then there are days out of the month where you're just like, I feel like a slob. I feel like a piece of shit. I feel like I can feel every bit of excess skin and stuff that's on my body. And I don't feel great about myself. And that in turn throws anxiety up. And it's like, is everyone staring at me? And then it's like, you then get angry at yourself because you're like, no, no one's staring at you. No one gives a shit. Like, stop. Why do you think the people are focused on you? You're being selfish. It just is a bigger and bigger and bigger cycle. So it's just remembering that, as RuPaul says, the inner saboteur in the back of your mind is someone that only gets louder if you feed it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you try and remember that inner saboteur is always going to have that voice, and it's going to be there, and sometimes it's going to be louder than others. But if you've got that one thing that reminds you that it's only a small part of who you are, and you are true to who you are at your core, and you're a good person, and you know that you're a good person, then outsides don't matter. And I'll tell you what, after 25, outsides really, really, really don't matter. They really don't matter. So if you don't have a date until you're 25, you're fine. I swear to God, you're fine. It's probably better if you don't date until after you're 25 anyway.
So let's talk about dating, because you talked about, becoming sexually active, but at some point you got to date, and I'm curious what your tips are for dating with an injury. Do you disclose your injury up front? Tell me, what do you do?
I am on lots of different dating apps, and in every dating app profile, I tend to have at least one or two photos of me in the chair, visibly showing the chair.
Yep.
My personal belief is that if they're not cool with seeing the chair straight up in the profile and they're swiping left automatically, then there's someone that's not going to have the emotional capacity to deal with any kind of sort of disability. They have their preconceived ideas. They can stay in the dark with their preconceived ideas. They will learn at a later date that not all disability is created equal, and not all disability is what they have in their mind. And you know what? It's fair enough to them too. A lot of people choose not to date people with disabilities, and that's fine. That's fine. I am open to having 2 rainbow wheels attached to my ass in my chair, obviously, in my dating apps, and it's always there. So, and you know what? Normally doesn't come up in conversation until you actually go, all right, let's meet face to face.
Yeah, okay. So you are a huge advocate for visually representing your injury, so that way people can just know, and you're not trying to hide it, you're not trying to explain it, you're just open and honest because it's part of who you are. Cool. That's your first part of your advice. What about your profile? Do you, in your About Me stuff, do you mention it at all, or not really?
Only if it comes across as funny.
Okay. So you use your humour.
I do a lot. It normally goes one of 2 ways. It's like, you know what they say about girls in wheelchairs? Strong forearms. And then the other one is happy to go for a long walk on the beach as long as it's paved. And if you get tired, I've always got a lap for you to sit on.
Okay. So you're using it as a pickup line here. I see where you're going.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and so there's a bit of playing on curiosity. Hey, if you're curious, I can teach you a thing or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
Absolutely.
And what about in terms of first meetups? What are your tips around that?
I think first meetups, if you've been upfront and honest about it from the start, it's not going to be that, oh my God, yeah. It's more for me, it's just being exactly 100% myself, absolutely 100% myself, and really pulling in on the common interests that we would have spoken about on those apps before we got anywhere. For me, it's normally about food, tea, because I'm a big tea fiend. I love a good, got to be a proper good loose leaf black tea. One of the best first dates I ever had was I went and did a high tea as a first date. And that was epic. So it was really cool. We got to sit in this gorgeous place and just looked really nice. That was awesome. So it's just finding things that are a little bit different but still accessible to you based on what you can do in the chair and out of the chair. So if I want to transfer out of the chair, I can get up and down off the floor out of my chair because that's what I'm physically able to do. Next first date I plan, if the girl is up for it, I plan to go to a picnic at the observatory because I feel like that would be a really fun time. So in Sydney City, because I love the stars, and who the fuck doesn't love a picnic? And you're right on the water. So that would be an epic time.
Do you feel like you do a lot of the planning of dates?
Yeah, I think because I tend to come across as the more masculine one, partly, but also because I know what is accessible for me as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely a collaboration, but I'll obviously bring ideas to the table. And that's a first date. I feel like a first meet up and a first date are 2 different things. Normally I first meet up for coffee, like during the day with a lot of people. And if things have gone well there, it's like, okay, cool. I see you. Let me take you out for dinner kind of thing. It's like, let's go get cocktails. Let's go smash a couple of drinks and then go wander around a museum or something and try not to touch the things.
Okay, so you're transitioning it into a longer period of time, which makes sense. Yeah. And I was curious if you were thinking about planning the dates a little bit, because the access part, you need to be able to speak up for what you need, but without sort of being awkward about it, and by suggesting the ideas, then you're the one kind of driving it to make sure it's accessible.
Driving without driving. It's a collaboration and if they say something like, I really like this place, it's like, that sounds amazing. I'm so up for that. Can we check that it's accessible? because I potentially will need to do a couple of different things if we choose to go there.
Yeah.
I may need to do a couple of different things just to sort of make sure that I'm set for that first. And you don't need to go into details about being like, there's no bathroom there, then, you know, I need to like use the bathroom right before we get in, or I just need to make sure that things are okay and stuff like that. So, or if it's like, or if there's a bunch of stairs to get up in there, it's like, okay, that's cool. I can, if you really, really, really want to go there, I can get myself in there. I need to make sure I'm able to get myself in there. It's like I may have to transfer, like I may have to bum up a few stairs kind of thing to get in there. But if you really want to go, we can obviously make that happen. So it's that sort of thing. And then calling ahead to make sure that they're aware that I'm in a chair. It's like, I know that you guys aren't accessible. I'm okay to get myself in there. Here's where we move forward with that. So I think being proactive when it comes to dating is definitely a must
essential
when you're dating with physical impairment. If there are certain things that you need to be in the hotel or be in a restaurant or a cafe or, you know, a museum or fruit picking, I don't know, if you guys want to go to like a flower farm one day or go and pat like baby goats or something, it's a multitude of different things to do.
Yeah, it's just
I
your
love
creativity.
food, so mine's so food centered. Or you want to do like Pinot and Picasso night kind of thing as a first date. That would be awesome too. You can see my complete lack of artistic skills when it comes to painting. But it's all up to your own creativity, and it's up to it's a collaboration between you and the person that you're going on a date with. That's, you know, you may be dating to have fun and stuff like that, and that's fine too, but still another person involved. And you've really got to remember that as much as you need to be good for you as the person with the disability, you got to make it collaborative, and you got to make sure that they're like, okay, yep, sure, we can do this as well.
They're keen. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, they were great advice. Yeah.
Hell yeah. And they're the ones that are missing out, you know?
It's a nah if it's not a hell yeah. You know what? I want to go pat baby goats. I'm going to go do some Googling on that and find myself a baby goat venue. But
there we go.
I think we've covered so much already in terms of acquiring your injury at a young age and sort of learning about sex, and maybe some tips for families or for folks around people to sort of help that young person get some information. Really, we just don't want people to feel anxious about this. We want people to feel confident.
Yeah,
and
for sure. And I think I never felt anxious around sex because I knew it was just normal for people to have sex at the end of the day. And that was so okay. And what I personally enjoy with sex was never going to be taboo because, one, there was so much, like for me personally, not identifying as the person with the disability, it would be more the fact that I would either look up pornography that was very much sort of centered around lesbian porn and stuff like that, because it was obviously what you enjoy watching when you're growing up kind of thing. It was so much that was never taboo in that sense because there was so much of it there. It was obviously taboo because you never saw people out and about in the communities and the areas that I grew up in. I would say, apart from Queensland, I grew up in the Bible Belt of New South Wales around Wagga Wagga. But, you know, it was just, I grew up through it, and I am who I am, and I've been very, very lucky in the fact that my family have supported me, and especially when I came out, I had fantastic support from most of my family for absolute certain. And yeah, it's been a very positive experience for me as a lesbian, as long as I've made sure that I've been physically safe, emotionally safe, still working on the emotional safety. But you know what? I think everyone still works on emotional safety. Of course.
What ways do you think your queerness helped you have a broader understanding of sexual activity and sexuality? Like, you had a broad sexual script. You're not kind of aiming for something able-bodied that you've watched on TV or something. I don't know. Tell me, what ways do you think it's helped?
When I was younger, I got taught from a younger age, it's just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. Just because I don't understand it doesn't mean it's wrong. As long as I'm not hurting anyone, and as long as I'm not getting hurt myself, there's nothing wrong with what I want to do and what I choose to do. And I think that for me was able for me to stay open-minded and allow my creativity in particular to be like, I want to work out a way that I can do that. I may not be able to physically do that, but I reckon there's something that I could fashion that would help me get to where I want to go with that. So it's definitely those sorts of things. And it comes into different sorts of toys, equipment, even fashioning some of my own sort of sexual assistive tech, I guess you'd call it. There's a million and one ways to use a wheelchair as long as you're doing it safely. So
yeah. And I think, you know, you already had the creativity as a disabled young person. You're always living with a disability to the point that you say, I don't really identify as disabled because it's just my life and I know no different. So your brain has already been wired to think creatively, and then now you kind of are exploring sex in a very expansive way.
And I think taking it back to actually growing up as a country kid as well, not being
right.
able to just order anything and it be there in the next 3 days. We had to wait for like weeks upon weeks growing up, so we had to be creative with what we had around, and like it's very much based around having to be creative with what you've got. As long as it's safe and as long as it's going to work out,
Very
then
resourceful.
you got to be resourceful. Got to be resourceful.
You've had all the life experience to be resourceful. So I think like that should really be our message to our young people is you've already had so much life experience to be resourceful. Just take this into the bedroom.
You're limited by your imagination. And you know what? Like I said, if you're having issues with your bladder and you're struggling with that and you still want to be intimate with your partner, then shower sex. There's so many different opportunities and ways for you to do it and be safe, and different toys to assist with a lot of different things. I think really being open to exploring different toys and making sure that you are safe when you are using those toys. Proper lubricant if you can't lubricate yourself or if you don't have enough lubrication, which I will say isn't specific to disability. There are plenty of women out there who can't self-lubricate. Plenty of women out there who can't self-lubricate, and it's quite confronting for them too. Looking and having conversations with friends about this kind of thing as well, depending on whether they're able-bodied or have a disability. Have the chats with your friends as well, because they may have similar situations. Normalize talking about sex with your mates.
Yeah.
And not in like a dodgy, horny way, just like in a, hey, I got this thing.
Yeah. I'm curious.
And yeah, I'm curious. What do you think?
Yeah. And then with that, you've got some collective wisdom. And if you realize everyone doesn't know.
The older you get, the less you realize you know. 100%. So then the more you get to be ruled by creativity.
So thank you so much for your time tonight and for sharing all your wisdom and your story, you know, in terms of how you've come to be here and be, you know, able to speak so confidently and openly about your life experience. It's a huge gift that you've just given to the community to be able to come and find a resource that they can hear and relate to and take your good tips from. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great time. And hey, if anyone wants to reach out, I'm on most social media platforms at either Jess_Pellow1.
Yep.
I think that's most of my social media. Yeah, so if anyone wants to reach out and have a chat, I'm obviously more than happy to have a chat.
Thanks, mate. Yeah. Huge thank you to Jess for sharing her story and her reflections with us all today. If you enjoyed this episode of A Really Good Sex Chat, please rate it on Spotify and share it with a friend so others can find it too. Until next time.